Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 36 of the How to Become a Doctor video podcast. This is a podcast sponsored by LSU Phase, which is pre-health advising, support, and education here at LSU, helping any LSU students and alumni from all majors get into and dental school, optometry, those sorts of things. So, anyway, check out our other episodes, but each episode is standalone. My name's Matt Duris. I am one of the pre-health advisors here. We also have Mr. Robbie Bowen, as well, our director of pre-health programs here on the call, who you'll meet later. And we have a special guest. Actually, one of our students in phase introduced us to this guest, who's actually a doctor who works at Our Lady of the Lake. We just want to throw in a little shout out. This is our episode being recorded here in the brand new Our Lady of the Lake Interdisciplinary Science Building. So we are open, ribbon cutting happening here at the week of the recording. And we're here for pre-health advising now on the second floor. So we're so thankful for the partnership with the lake. Our med school, Baton Rouge Regional Campus is already there. The regional campus, we do residencies there, which this doctor works with. But without further ado, we'll introduce them. So just want to pass it off to Dr. Max Madera to introduce himself. Just say hello to you guys.
Thank you for that introduction, Matt and Robbie. I appreciate the time and the opportunity to come share a morsel of knowledge with your students. Like you said, my name is Dr. Max Madera. I am a board certified cardiac anesthesiologist. I've been practicing at Our Lady of the Lake um, for about 13 years now, right? So I'm a shareholder and partner at Anesthesiology Group Associates. Live in the city, live in University Club. Got a wife and three beautiful children, right? And just excited to be here, right? A little bit more about me. I'm not only an anesthesiologist, like I said, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I'm an entrepreneur, right? And I'm the founder of an organization called the Pulse of Perseverance Project, which is a digital mentorship platform that now serves nearly 900 students nationwide.
And that's one of the reasons, obviously, there's a lot of doctors in town and a lot of doctors at the lake. And, we're going to get to your mentorship thing second. We just want to hear personally first, medicine's something you really got to want to do to make it through. You obviously made it through all your training now. So what was it, that got you so interested in this field of medicine?
Well, for me, I was originally born in Brooklyn, New York. Was raised in Washington, D.C. In DC, I was very fortunate, right? I was very fortunate to be at a high school that was a magnet high school, where I actually had a guidance counselor who took the time to get to know like what my interests were. And if you can imagine, in ninth and 10th grade, I really didn't have any solid idea about what I really wanted to do. I just was a kid who came from, I guess I would what people would call high risk environments, but or like Kendrick Lamar would say, a good kid in Mad City, right? But I had, even though the outside environment was complex, internally I had a good moral structure and a good moral foundation. Now that it just contributed to a certain attribute where I just went to school and did my work, right? Going to school and doing my work allowed some teachers to see focus in me that at the time I didn't know I necessarily had, or even potential that I didn't have. So my guidance counselor was like, well, what is it that you want to do? And I said, well, I'm really not sure. They were like, well, you have good grades in the sciences, why don't you go volunteer at a hospital? And at the time, I was like, okay, right. So because part of the core requirements for the high school I attended was that we had to have over 200 hours of community service. So for me, it was easy. I would just walk across the street, start getting my hospital hours, and then that would be that. But what ended up turning into a situation where I was just supposed to be passing out food trays to patients, which I didn't necessarily take too much pleasure in. I was just kind of like serving a good role in society. What I noticed was doctors who looked like me in positions of leadership, right? And for my young mind, that actually sparked a keen interest, right, in the field of medicine, because that was the first time I had actually seen people from my background, making key clinical decisions and really being in positions of leadership. It just catapulted me to another level. And so from that time, I was like, hey, I'm going to be a doctor, right? Now that's easier said than done, But I remember going back to my counselor and saying and telling them, yeah, I want to be a doctor. And they were like, oh, okay, well, that's a really hard profession to enter. I was like, oh, okay, well, what's the requirement? And then they were like, well, you have to do well in your sciences and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. And they were like, there's a school down in Louisiana that is number one for placing African Americans in the medical school. You should definitely check it out and apply. Well, I did. That school ended up being Xavier University of Louisiana. Um, and so when I was able, I applied, got in, got a scholarship to go down to Xavier University of Louisiana. But little did I know I wasn't prepared for the rigors of an academic curriculum. And so when I started my journey, I remember I always tell this story when I give my talks with students. I remember the first time I took my first general chemistry test, and my score was so low that I tried to flip the paper upside down just to make sure I was reading the right score. And that was a shock to me, right? Because up until that point, I was studious. It's not like I was unfocused, but I realized I was just unprepared, right? And so when you talk about preparation, there's an assortment of reasons for that, that we probably can't get into the details and the context of that during this conversation. But in the global sense, that was a wake up point for me to say, hey, this is going to be really harder than what I thought it would be. And fortunately for me, there was a pre-medical office and kind of like a set pre-medical program at Xavier where it's kind of like you can follow it to a T. And then there was an investment from classmates and students who were willing to share their advanced level of preparation with me to help me prepare for tests better. So was my college experience great? In a grand scheme, yes. But what I had was a drive and a work ethic, even though, well, the 18-year-old me didn't necessarily match where I needed to be academically. So over the course of those 4 years, what I did was I just kept my head down. Like even if I got bad grades, even if I got C's, I just kept on working, just kept working, and I remained consistent throughout that process. And so by the time it was time to take the MCAT, it's kind of like a similar story. When I took the MCAT, because I was told my junior year, spring of my junior year, I should, as a pre-med, you should take the MCAT. Knowing I had no business taking the MCAT when I took that MCAT, given all kind of like all of my knowledge gaps up until that point. But I took it anyway. And my pre-med advisor, I remember when I got my score back, it was kind of like the same thing. I always tell the students, like, the bell curve, you get the score back, and the bell curve kind of like determines whether or not you're in the 50th percentile or above or below. Well, I was so far, I was like way off the bell curve to the left, right? So again, that was another a challenge for me, thinking that do I quit at this point? Absolutely not, right? And for me, my pre-med advisor was like, listen, you have decent grades. They're not excellent, but you got a crappy MCAT score. There's no way you're going to get into medical school. And it was easy for me because I was like, that wasn't just a reality check. I was just facing what the circumstance was at the time. So like you're gonna have to like really lock in for like 6 to 12 months to really refortify where your gaps are. So the advice that was given to me as a senior, as an entering senior, in college was that you would probably be best served going to something called a post-baccalaureate program. And that was one of the best decisions I probably made in my life, right? So I went to a post-baccalaureate program called Med Prep, and this was at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois. And literally for a year, what it did was allow me just to refortify my basic science concepts that I had gotten exposure to in college and just study for the MCAT. And so, that's literally all I did. I literally treated school and MCAT preparation like it was a job for an entire year. And fortunately, it worked out, right? So my scores were good enough, and because of the extra year, kind of boosted my GPA a little bit more. So on paper, my trend was up like entire time. So by the time when I was a freshman in college, I was down here. By the time I had finished that post baccalaureate program, the grades had always done this. And I think with that MCAT score, that's what literally allowed me to matriculate into medical school. I ended up going to Howard University School of Medicine, back where I went to high school in Washington, D.C. Graduated from there. Obviously, med school is a challenge in itself, but because there was a sense of familiarity there because I was from the region and I was able, I didn't have the stress of money and I was able to stay home with my father, things of that nature. What ended up happening was that I was able to match into an anesthesiology residency program, right? And that was at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, Michigan, right? And from there, as a resident, I excelled, and I was able to match in cardiac anesthesia at the same institution. And so by the time I was done with all of my training, my wife was from this area and she wanted to come back home because she hated the cold, right? So that's how we ended up. And it was between here and New Orleans, right? And I was going to go back to New Orleans, but it was an academic institution and they didn't really have the volume and the caseload that I was looking for, given my subspecialty. And so like everything matched up here in Baton Rouge. So and I've surprisingly been here ever since. So the reality is that I've probably been living here longer than I have been living in New York or DC at this point. So I really got to claim Louisiana at this point, like it's home now. So
It's in your blood. Well, we're glad you're here. Like you said, we obviously, other than the lake, biggest hospital in the state, level one trauma. Y'all see a lot over there, and I know our students are privileged to, train there, for they're doing residency or med school there. So that's great. So
Can you
obviously, oh, you go
can
yeah,
ahead.
you
go ahead.
can you talk a little bit about your subspecialty and like what does that entail, cardiac anesthesiology?
So with anesthesiology, for people to try to get a general semblance of it, people automatically think, oh, you're an anesthesiologist, so all you do is put people to sleep. Well, that's not all. What we really do is we get paid to wake people up. And in a variety of ways, right? So people don't understand, especially when you're when you're figuring out what the specialty is that we work with a variety of patients. We just don't take care of adults. We take care of children. We take care of geriatric patients. We take care of obstetric patients. We take care of neonates, which are really small babies. And within that, right, you have to have subspecialties because the more complex the surgery, um, the more you really need people who do it every day in order to maximize the best outcomes, right? So with cardiac anesthesia, if you think about it, anytime that somebody goes for open heart surgery, so that means when they're getting their coronary arteries bypassed because they have blockages, like when you think about patients who have heart attacks, and a cardiologist can't put something called a stent in those blockages. The cardiologists refer those patients to heart surgeons, and those heart surgeons have to basically create something called grafts, which are basically like if I had to liken it to anything, it's like imagine you getting into a traffic jam and the police block off the road, right? Well, when that road is blocked, what do? They create a detour, right? So the heart surgeons have to create detours where those blockages in the heart are in order to oxygenate areas of the heart, right? So we they but so as cardiac anesthesiologists, you have to learn how to manage those patients really precisely and accurately because it's high stakes, right? Then you also any patients who have to have their valves in their heart replaced, right? Your heart got four chambers, four valves. Any one of those valves sometimes need to be removed for a variety of reasons, right? So again, you need to have an anesthesiologist who's comfortable with managing those, right? Sometimes the major blood vessel that comes from the heart, which is called the aorta, sometimes it tears or what we call dissect, right? And those are like life-threatening surgeries because that aorta is basically the highway to the rest of the organs in your body, particularly like the closest set of organs from the heart that's connected to the aorta is the vasculature that supplies your brains, right? So that's a really, really complex surgery. Anything that involves the ascending aorta or the thoracic aorta, those are really, really high complex cases where you need people who are highly subspecialized because um, decisions matter in a matter of milliseconds, right? You got to make decisions quickly, and you got to know what you're doing, and you have to be on time. You have to know how to communicate effectively with heart surgeons. So it's high stakes, sometimes high stress environment. But again, it's just like anybody else who does to do things high stress. You do it because you love it, right? So for me, I love it, right? And that's just the heart surgeon component. Now we also do the thoracic cases. So if you think about patients who go for think about any patients, particularly in Louisiana, where you got a lot of patients with lung cancer, right? The thoracic surgeons have to treat and manage those patients, and they go for, they go for high risk surgeries all the time, right? And then you have the vascular surgeons, right? The vascular surgeons, they're always dealing with a potentially loss of limb procedures, which are high risk, and also patients who have like poor perfusion to areas like their gut and their lower extremities. So cardiac anesthesia, it's like a mix of all of those that subspecialty. I love it, right? And because people ask me, well, what do you do all day? In the grand scheme of things, um, it's putting out a lot of fires. But the reality is for me, I feel like I just play video games all day, right? So 'cause I get to use like all these like interesting toys and I get to like do a bunch of procedures, right? And those procedures, they help us manage the patients better. So the heart surgeons can just kind of like, not have to think about that, right? Because we have that, right? So, I liken it to like being a co-pilot on, one of these airplanes out here, that are flying across the friendly skies. So, it's awesome. I love it. Like I said, I'm 13 years into this, but I feel like I can do it for as long as God allows me to, to have the clear mind, clarity of thought, and strong hands. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question, Robbie.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, and so you obviously love more than just medicine. You love mentorship, and we can see that. Love for you just to briefly say how you got into it, but especially kind of drive that to. I mean, how did you get into starting a whole organization, app? Just kind of share about that side, what y'all do.
Yeah. So for this kind of correlates with my journey in medicine, right? Like I think if I mentioned to you earlier, for me, um, early on in my academic journey, at the time, when I wasn't getting the grades that I wanted, I always thought it was a matter of, oh, I'm just not smart enough, right? And then as I progressed and I was able to fill in knowledge gaps, and then you reach, a level where you accomplish all your dreams and your goals, academically, then it's like it had nothing to do with intelligence. It had everything to do with preparation, right? And then so, um, knowing that my journey was unique in a sense, um, what I did was two of my best friends and I wrote a book, right? And that book was called Pulse of Perseverance: Three Black Doctors on Their Journey to Success. And what that book was, it was almost like a blueprint, right? For parents who have these children who aren't necessarily from the greatest environments, but want more for their children, whether they're parents or grandparents or people in what we call the villages. And what that did was that book was raw and it was authentic. And that book um, put us on platforms where we probably wouldn't have reached in regards to like media, right? And so obviously when we went on, like we ended up going on the Today Show, Steve Harvey Show, and that all of the positive reviews from the book basically, people bought the book, right? And we were like, well, do we spend this money? No. Our initial goal was just to start a nonprofit and basically just give back to the younger version of ourselves. And so that was the initial goal of the Postal Perseverance Project. But what it ended up turning out into was that what I felt was in order to really help the next generation, I got to give more than just a book, right? And I wanted to give more than something to um, basically almost serve as like an outlier. But when you're talking about why there's so many disparities, um, that works at a system level, that something that a school can't necessarily do, right? Our schools are underfunded, teachers are overwhelmed, right? And what I realized is that um, when it comes to mentorship is more than just um, when I look back upon my life, I realized that I was just lucky. I really was. I had the right people at the right time tell me to guide me to make the right decisions. But then what I also realize is that, well, why does it have to be like that, right? And so one of the rate limiting steps that I feel like why we don't have better communities is because there's a two-sided problem to mentorship. One side, from the student side, is just access, right? Kids don't know what they don't know. And unfortunately, in the traditional sense, I feel like our traditional school systems um, in certain respects, they're very outdated, right? So they say, okay, like, yeah, if you're smart, oh, yeah, you should be a doctor. You should go to law school. Maybe you'll be an engineer. But there's so many things out there. There's so many ways to impact society than just, that way, right? And we don't really invest the schools are just too stressed in order to really clarify everything that's out there for kids at large when they're trying to make decisions about life, right? And on the mentor side, right, for me, it was a matter of time and scalability, right? I always feel like, you know, if it's in you, it's in you. If you like to help people, which I do, if you like to help people, it's very simple, but you also realize it can be cumbersome in terms of like the amount of time that's necessary to put into pour into somebody that's not your child, right?
Right.
Uh, but there are caveats to that, right? And so one of the caveats is that when you have the ambitious student, right? If the ambitious student, depending on where their zip code was, they'll tell an ambitious student in a poor neighborhood, yeah, go to college, right? So then that kid thinks that automatically think, oh, college becomes the end goal, right?
Mhm.
But the reality is it's so much bigger than college, right?
Mhm.
They don't really push that kid to say, oh, okay, look around you. What are the problems that you don't like right now, right? And let's create like projects around that because
Mhm.
will fill a need. And I think when we impart in kids an expectation of excellence and problem solving in that way, you'll see kids who come from more unfortunate circumstance rise to those levels where they're not just CEOs or they're not just running divisions of leadership, right? You'll start to get more problem solvers for world community problems first, local problem, which are local problems, and then that will
Mhm.
transpire into worldwide problems, right? So
Mhm.
a long story short, what I wanted to was create was to fill a role where I served the younger version of myself, but try to make it scalable and repeatable over and over again. Right. So that is, I feel like what we're doing, what we're in the process of doing now. Obviously, when you're talking about from this entrepreneurial realm, there are a multitude of challenges, right? Which again are kind of go beyond the scope of this discussion. But what it does is it gives me a reason to continue what I'm doing because it's part of my why, right? It's part of my why to just say, okay, this is bigger than medicine, right? This is all about putting young people in a position to not only um, succeed but thrive, right? Thrive, thrive in something that goes beyond their wildest imagination. And for me, I feel like I'm in that phase now where I was like, oh man, if I remember just praying, oh man, I just want to make it to med school. Then it was like, oh, I just want to graduate med school. Then it was like, oh man, if I get this residency, and then you have these things, and what you realize that when you're goal driven, it just there are levels to it, and you just continue to reach and climb, right? And when you start looking at things from a system level strategy, you're like, okay, how do I better society in a way that, benefits not only what's going on in present day, but in future generations, with the hope that you're the spark that changes, outcomes in a real tangible way.
Great. So y'all's organization, like pragmatically, like sounds like you guys are connecting to these young pre-meds like you and setting them up with mentors and just from your website, you know,
Mhm.
network and just share a little bit about the practical side, what y'all are doing.
So the practical side of it is this. What we do, if I had to say, long story short, what we do is we connect ambitious students with supportive networks, um, career opportunities, and financial support, right? Our impact is it. We've impacted over 900 students nationwide. We've given out $100,000 in scholarships, right, by
Wow.
ourselves. We have over 200 mentors nationwide in a variety of disciplines that includes STEM, business, law, finance, and entrepreneurship, and obviously medicine, right?
Right.
We have over 40 career fields represented on the platform, and our mentors serve over a variety of 30 states. The thing that gets me excited is that we have when we are a digital career mobility engine, what we have is we have AI mentor matching, and that AI mentor matching matches mentors and mentees with intention, right? So it's
Mm.
an algorithm that allows people to connect based off interests. Once we align them, right, that's not the only feature for us. We have a something called a career pathway library. So if you think about it, it's almost like an explore page. So in the grand scheme of things, if you put yourself in like the frame of like a 10th or 11th grader that is unsure what they want to do, right? They not only get exposure to somebody like myself who's an anesthesiologist or any other kind of physician, they also get exposure to other health professionals in the STEM space. They also get exposure to people in all the other disciplines that I mentioned. So, when you start to like go into the library, you start to see all these different career pathways that you didn't even know existed outside of what the media shows you, right? Which is highly important for us. The other thing is that we have the opportunity in a scholarship page, right? So don't just think our scholarships, but what we do is we source other scholarships through our network from the mentors that are already in our ecosystem, right? Think of internships, externships, summer programs. Any mentor on the platform can kind of go and share these features within the engine at any time that they feel like it. Then the other thing, which is what we're really proud of, is that we have now created something called a mentorship analytics page, right? So think about this as almost like a mentee comes on and then they say they want to be X, right? They want to be a president of LSU veterinary school or president of LSU, right? So what we do is like we have a goal mapping feature, right? Which is I feel like is what I'm most proud of now. What that does is it allows our mentees to stay accountable to what their goal is, right? And our mentors to be able to follow what the mentees are doing, exactly where they are, so they can give them more feedback in real time about where their funnels are in their journey, right? And through that, we're able to capture data to track that. And so the most important thing is we want to track that longitudinally, right? Because everybody knows that mentorship works, but nobody's tracking this in a way that's really tangible, right? To help not only organizations like ourselves, but also nonprofits, colleges, um, institutions such as Our Lady of the Lake. So that is the crux of everything that our digital career mobility engine does, right? And the kids, for any kid that's on our platform, they can never say that they don't have access to excellence anymore, right? Which is the most important thing. They can always, our platform is on 24/7, right? With access to mentors, any mentor on the platform that they wish, right? So they can't say, well, I didn't know anybody or I don't know anybody. It's there. It's for them to use. And it's a very serious platform, vetted and based off of making sure that they succeed and get to where they need to be.
Great. So yeah, yeah. So obviously, sounds like you keep yourself busy, but well, I'm going to share y'all's website here at the end so they can see the website and such. But you
Mhm.
know, I want on the other side, I just kind of want to hear from you to say to our students. A lot of them are nervous to actually make that reach out to a mentor, reach out to a doctor, reach out to someone they hear of. So just want to hear kind of just some tips about dispelling some myths or fears for helping to bridge that gap.
So again, and that's the other reason why we created this platform, right? So let's say if, well, I never say no to any kid, but let's say if for some reason the kid reaches out to me and they ask a question, right? And because I kind of want to put you in a space in terms of how this platform works, two-sided platform. The kid can ask any question. They download the app. They can ask me any question that they want, right? So no weird, idiosyncrasies if they just don't like meeting people in person. I answer that question via video format, such as the way we're on. My answer now lives in my library. So a lot of times the kids can get their questions answered because another kid has already asked a question. I've already answered that question for them, right? So um, when we talk about, so that's the solution that the Pulse Perseverance Project, the digital career mobility engine, already has in place. But when kids ask that question, what I usually tell them is this: it's very straightforward. I say, hey, look, the first thing that you need to do is start within your interest groups in your college. So at LSU, if you're in a pre-med interest group, start there for the network of physicians that have either given talks to your group in the past, right? Or work the alumni within that group, right? You start there. If that doesn't work, a lot of kids don't realize that at some point they went to the doctor, right? And they went to go see a pediatrician. And the pediatrician has quite a large network of doctors, right? Even though they don't want to be pediatricians. That's another easy way. The third way is ask their parents if they know any physicians in network, right? And sometimes, because again, when it comes to mentorship, 85% of success when it comes to the marketplace always is always usually through somebody that knows somebody. All right. So um, kids don't realize the amount of power that they have within their own network because they're not thinking of, on that level. And obviously the fourth one is to attend conferences, right? Obviously if it's not on campus, a lot of times, interest groups have like these regional conferences or regional career days, and they have to be ready to not only, reach out to mentors directly face to face, but also have a LinkedIn page ready to go, right? And expressing their interest. And a lot of times I always tell people it's like the rule of three. Well, doctors are extremely busy. You send an email one time, it's probably not going to work the first time, right? You got to do it at least three times. And three times if they don't respond, either their email doesn't work or they just don't want to help you, right? But it's very rare that a physician will ignore a student who has that much tenacity and that much interest into seeing what they do for a living, right? That is what I found that works. Now, informally, obviously, when there are any opportunities to shadow in the hospital, right, that comes through the networking. But there's also a key lever where there are programs like the Lake has programs, pre-med programs that the kids can just get experience in the hospital as we speak, and that being in the hospital, you'll be um, introduced to a variety of healthcare professionals that would be willing to help you. For me, I would say the biggest thing, if again, if one of those things will work, right? And if they don't work, I'll give you $5, like, but it'll work, right? Um, and that's just in terms of the outreach. Now, when it comes to getting to this level, I also tell the kids like the first thing has to be first. Obviously, academics come first. You got to be able to kill your own bear and sit down, study, lock in, and take those exams. The other thing when it comes to, the opportunity and networking, it's not priority. Experience is always good because exposure is good because the exposure then, you're more prepared as you progress. But I would also say that outside of the exposure and studying, it's the ability to take tests, right? And some people say that's a skill. And everybody's ability to take those tests, again, it all depends on your level of preparation. But I can't tell you how much time it's going to take for you to master material, right? You have to figure out what your own learning style is and apply your learning style to figure out, is that the most efficient for you? And the more efficient you are, the quicker you'll get the information. And the quicker you get the information, the better you'll perform. Um, what else can I tell? Like these students that are coming out. One thing that I've noticed, right? And I don't want to talk bad about any students, but when they do have the opportunity, there are ways in order to be able to maximize their opportunity when they're there. Meaning that when a physician gives you the opportunity to come shadow them, right? Even if you know, even if you know nothing, you have to turn your phone off, put it away, and remain engaged, right? Act interested. Because if you're a student and you get that opportunity and you're disinterested, that'll probably be your last time, right, around that physician, right? So, and also follow up, right? Thank anybody that gives you an opportunity, thank them for the opportunity that they've created for you. And never burn a bridge, right? Never, never burn a bridge. And a bridge can be burned if you just come for one opportunity and never reach out to that physician again, right? Because they say, oh, well, they weren't really interested in the first place, right? So there are a multitude of ways in order to help, students succeed and thrive.
Well, that was great. That was worth its weight in gold for our students. Just appreciate you talking candidly, even giving your three-step rule of don't be shy to follow up. And
Yep.
I want to go ahead and share your website here. Just well, I know it's an app, but the website showing the app they got as well. So you got the website, the app. Is there any other? I mean, is this kind of the best way to get connected to you guys? Any other things you guys use besides the website and app?
That is the best way to get connected to me. Obviously, if you click on the for students section, that would be the most interesting thing for them. Because again, that it gets them not only connected to the app, that also shows them, if they ever want to apply for one of our scholarships, everything that we do, how easy it is to get started, right? It goes through our milestones. You also have access to our book if you want to join. And yeah, man, that is we are on the mobile platform. If you ever want to connect with me, it's just the P3 app or the Pulse of Perseverance app. You download it at the App Store. If you have, a Droid, you download it on Google Play, and you will not only be connected to me, you will be connected to somebody based off your personal interests, right? What your interests are. And so we're a community, right? And our community is just focused on helping these students reach a level beyond they can even imagine where they are right now academically, right? We don't want we want more doctors, but we want more people who are going to enter into a field, particularly when it comes to medicine, or how they're going to shape medicine, right, in the future, um, in light of all of the changes across society, right? We're just living in a world that's rapidly evolving, so I think it's an exciting time to be a student, and they are limitless in regards to the ability to interconnect with people, right? Especially when you have platforms like this that exist. So, and obviously institutions like yours, where sometimes um, the resources are sitting right in front of their faces, but they don't even realize like how to access it or unlock it, right? So, no, definitely, that's the best way to contact me is to just download our mobile app and just connect with me directly right then and there, right? And I promise you, as any student can tell you, that I've worked with on that campus, that I will respond, right?
At least after 3 times, right?
Yes. Well, no, usually for me it's the first time, because that's how vested I am, because
Right,
this is my passion, right?
right,
But also, if they also want to connect me, I'm also on LinkedIn under Max Madera, MD, right? So,
right.
and that's also a way to encourage them to get their professional profile started as well.
All right, yeah, great.
Yep.
Well, thank you once again. I know you're busy, and we're excited to post this, but we look forward just to our students getting connected with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.